Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this convening of the Monroe County Election Board on August 3rd. I will ask the Deputy Clerk to take the roll, just so we have that on record. Laramie, if you can mind taking the roll. Yeah, thanks. And I'll try to speak up. I know I'm always very quiet on this thing.
Chair Henry.
Present.
Board Member Clark.
Present.
Board Proxy Apple.
Yes, present.
All right, let's get going. So the first order of business is the approval of the minutes from July 6th. I believe those were provided out. Are there any edits to those minutes?
Nicole Brown mentioned that she appreciated Sherry's efforts on the minutes, and she said no significant additions, deletions, or corrections.
Okay.
And I have none.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from July 6th.
Second that?
There's a second. Ms. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Chair Henry.
Yes?
Board Member Clark.
Yes.
Board Proxy Apple.
Yes.
All right.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, next on the agenda is the approval and disposition of minutes from a bank of meetings here between March 2nd, 2023 and June 1st, 2023. There's 9 of those. I want to just first thank the staff at the election board for compiling those. I know there was a lot of activity in those meetings as we had the work of the body on the questions in District 6 here in Bloomington. I know it's a little unorthodox to approve a bank of minutes all at once like this, but understanding some of the staffing turnover in the office, that it was just a little rough getting all these put together, but I appreciate Sherry's effort in getting all these put together. Having said that, I know that some of those meetings occurred with different people in these seats, but just so we have it on the record, the minutes on the record, and hopefully getting back on a pace where we approve monthly each minutes rather than in bank. I'm happy to take comment or motions on this particular item if there's any other comment before we proceed to vote. None? None? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes en banc from the dates listed here, March 2nd, 2023 through June 1st, 2023. Is there a motion to do so?
It's March 2nd.
March 2nd, thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I could support the motion to do that.
Okay, I will second. Ms. Wilson, if you call the roll.
Chair Henry.
Yes.
Board Member Clark.
Abstain.
Board Proxy Apple.
Yes.
Okay, by a vote of 2-0-1, the motion carries. Those minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is updates from the clerk's office. Clerk Brown is not here today. She has a proxy. Ms. Napoli, do you have any updates from her before we ask staff?
No, other than the minutes look great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Ms. Wilson or staff, are there any?
Zoom's not hearing.
Okay, we'll just take a pause for a technical issue in the webinar. One moment. It says the Zoom meeting cannot hear Ms. Wilson. So Laramie, could you turn on your mic when you talk to make sure the mic's on? Hopefully that picks up. So aside from, are there any updates from the election division to share today? Are there any updates from the division today? Ms. Clerk Brown's not here to share any, but are there any additional notes to share with the board today? Okay, hearing none from there. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the general election 2023 polling locations and the approval of polling locations for the 2023 general election. Do we have a copy of that list over there to review that we could share? Yeah. Yeah, we pass up. Thank you. I don't think it was in the packet today. I just want to make sure we have it. Thank you. Okay, so all right, I'll go ahead and share that down the lane. So, Ms. Wilson, so the new list includes those that we need to open for the MCCSC referendum, correct?
Correct.
All right.
New polling locations, add in onto the municipal primary bulletin. It has all of the other townships except for Richmond and East Boston that are served by the Richmond and East Boston
Okay.
Corporation. One exception to that is the 9 districts, one so that is
Okay.
the full site locations, the full site locations that were added back were the same locations that were used in the 2022 elections for those precincts that we added back. So
Okay.
there's CCS connect.
So the good news is we've been to those places before and very recently, and they're all, they've been looked at, they're good to go.
They would be the same precinct for municipal Bloomington in the spring, and then added back from the 2022 panel for the rest of the county that are in the CSC. One exception, Rich House in the spring, actually, was Richmond 9, was moved to Highland Park.
Sorry, your mic is still not on.
Okay, there's a tech question, so the mic's still not, is it lit up? Is it green for you? The microphone, is the mic green for you there? Yeah, they're TSD is saying that, yeah, I'd bring it real close in. Yeah, I have to do the same thing. Thanks, Laramie.
Just want to practice it.
I mean, I can hear you, but it might not be coming in on the TSD. TSD, is it coming through? Okay. Stand by, folks. Thanks. So, are you guys wiring it up right now? Okay. Got it. While we're fixing Ms. Wilson's mic, I can just say, again, thank you for compiling the new list. I know we had to add a few more polling locations, which will put a little bit of more of a burden on our poll recruiters to identify workers for those polling locations. But of course, we want to do that good work to make sure that the new locations have staff to support the ballot initiative there, the administration of the ballot initiative for MCCSC. Do any of the board members have comment or questions about the poll locations or the process as we review this today? Judith, anything?
I do. I wanted to be sure that I understood correctly that the cost for opening these, the polling places where there was nothing else but the referendum question on the ballot, who pays for that? I believe it's the school corporation. Do they do that beforehand? How does that work, or do you know?
I don't, but as we're getting mics going again, Ms. Wilson, do you know when, to Ms. Benkart's question, the school corporation reimburses or pays for the polling locations that they're using? Is that before, during, after? It's a question she had.
This will be done after
So-
the election.
Okay, so it's done after the election. Okay.
Okay. The other question I had is who's responsible for staffing the?
Staffing question. I mean, I'm happy to take a shot at it, but yeah, the poll recruiters that we use to recruit for polls for both parties just extend their work to the additional polling locations, unless I'm mistaken. Is that right, Ms. Wilson? We just continue to recruit for the additional spaces, the two poll recruiters, right?
The additional poll sites, there are 10 additional poll sites because of this. Each one will have a minimum of 5 poll workers. Many of them are smaller poll sites to begin with. They have 25, some they have more. And then all of those costs for those additional poll sites will be passed on to the
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Good questions. Ms. Napoli, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but I'm happy to recruit at IU for student volunteers for some of those positions.
Yeah, and I would just make that good public service announcement to folks that as our poll recruiting goes on, you can easily call election board and volunteer to work on the polls. It is a busy day, but it's a good day to help support the good civic duty of election work in our community. We usually have a good stable of people that have really supported that work over the years, and that is a testament to the work of the election board staff to help get our folks in there and trained and ready to go. But do reach out to election board, and thank you for the offer to recruit some students, I hope, as they come back to Bloomington and are looking for some lunch money, I guess. We'll just call it that. Any other questions about the polling locations?
No.
No,
All right.
thank you.
Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to adopt the polling locations for the 2023 general election. Is there a motion to do so?
I so motion.
Is there a second?
I probably should abstain because I don't really have a.
Okay, that's fine. I can go ahead and second the motion. Ms. Wilson, if you'll call the roll, please.
Chair Henry,
Yes?
Board Member Bickford,
Yes.
Board Proxy Howell.
Abstain due to lack of big picture.
Fair. So a vote of 2-0 to 1 abstention. The motion carries. The poll locations are adopted, and we will continue our work getting ready for the general. Thank you, everybody. Okay, next on the agenda is the Vote Center Study Committee draft organization proposal. There is a document that was socialized in county records online, as well as among the board here, for how we will compose the committee that we agreed to create as we investigate the opportunity for poll centers here in Monroe County. As this is a working document, I think the process we should really work through is to go line by line to make adjustments and then take the vote on the committee structure. So if by the end of today we have a study committee structure, the parties that are involved with staffing this committee can get to work with their appointments and get the body moving into investigating the opportunities. So with that, I know I think county legal had some commentary on the structure that we may want to consider. Ms. Turner-King, did you want to share some opportunities here for amendment or adjustment to the proposal?
I think the mic was down, so I'm just going to yell. Can you hear me?
I can, and we'll parrot back what we need to, but yeah, outside voice, please. Yep.
So I reviewed the Vote Center document, and I
Yeah, it's not, I will say it's not picking up on Zoom. We'll continue to work on the technical difficulty. We do have staff literally under the desk working on it, but in the interest of time, if we can try to at least get it voiced in the room and we can work through it.
okay. So I looked at the document, and I did have some suggestions. My first suggestion goes toward the term identified in the document. The document says that the committee would complete work no later than 150 days after their first meeting. Although I understand that there is eagerness and a desire to get this up and moving, I don't know that putting a hard deadline would be the best mechanism, and I might recommend that for consideration, or consider just saying that the committee shall serve until the vote plan is complete, and then put in that the committee would update you. I'm getting to the podium.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
I'm weirdly going to join you on the bench.
That's fine.
Can you, okay, I think I'm picking up now.
I think we're good. Okay.
Okay, so if perhaps the term should include just till the completion of the vote center plan, and then you could add in that the committee would update the election board within so many days of their progress, so that the election board stays up to date on what's happening with the committee, but then the committee isn't rushing through the work to a hard deadline.
So I guess, yeah, we can just go by line and just take motions to address this, I guess. So is there a commentary from the board on that? Any questions or?
I guess I want to know what you, in an earlier meeting, Tree had indicated she didn't want the vote centers to, be really worked on until after the general election in November of 2024. Is that a time frame that we're looking at, or are we trying to get it done quicker? And do we even have, are we going to be able to do that?
Yeah, so my view is that since the composition of the body is not us and it's other people, that work can work in parallel with the administration of the election in 23 and beginning in 24. I mean, ideally, if it is a compressed time schedule, there could be a plan presented that could be taken into effect in the 2024 cycle, depending on how complicated this is. But I know that Clerk Brown, and I don't want to speak for her, but I know that she had mentioned in that same meeting that she also didn't want to see this go on forever either. So there's a certain, we could have analysis paralysis for years on this issue. We already have 12 years already of that in our community. But at the same time, I can appreciate that a compressed schedule means that there might be demands on election board resources, understanding the current staffing constraints at the board, right? So there, yeah, I get it. So I don't have a feeling one way or another other than an infinite amount of time people will fill it. that's my view. Ms. Napoli, do you have any thoughts or concerns about that?
Did you have more to add?
Yeah.
And then I'll jump in.
Just that I think given there's, at least to my knowledge, there's not an election supervisor at this point. Is that still the case?
That is correct.
Okay. And then with Tree also now missing, trying to push it through quickly might cause us more problems than if we take our time. And with not having an election in 2025, putting the bulk of the work there so that we're up and going in 2026. That for the county election in 2026. Because it's going to take time to get the community to look at this and accept this, and we don't want to rush. I understand your concern as well, so we don't want to leave it open-ended, but at the same time, we don't want to push it through. My fear is that we won't get the consensus of the community to actually support this. So that's all.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Other thoughts? Yeah.
To Board Member Bankhart's point, you have to also remember that the committee will have to develop a plan. There'll have to be a public hearing on those plans that has its own notice component. So, if you're figuring 150 days from their first meeting, I think you're rushing the public notice component, the public meetings, things like that.
So it sounds like that aggressive time frame might pose problems given public notice and comment on a product and also time for public notice and comment. Ms. Napoli, did you have additional thoughts on that one?
Well, just that I'm really happy to know that this is being considered, and I do like the idea of taking the time it needs to have a quality process, to bring in public input, as well as to be able to be sure that the election staff is in a good place to do that. So that all makes really good sense. And I'm also very just curious about what models they're looking at from other cities, because I think there's a lot of really innovative work being done at vote centers, and that could be something, again, worth exploring since there's time allows. And lots of us are eager for this to happen, so glad to hear it.
So perhaps then I'll form a motion here in real time, but to strike some language out of the number 2 that maybe allows for more space here. So I'd recommend or make the motion to say that the committee shall serve at the pleasure of the election board until the completion of their work, unless otherwise extended by the Board of Elections by majority vote. Is that a fair amendment to provide more time? So I'll repeat it because I talked really fast. Molly, I know you were typing there, but the number 2 being the proposed amendment is that we strike it, and it reads as such. The committee shall serve at the pleasure of the election board until the completion of their work, unless otherwise extended by the election board by majority vote.
I think that sounds fair.
Okay, so I have the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Wilson, will you call the roll on that one?
Chair Henry,
Yes?
Board Member Baker,
Yes.
Board Proxy Member.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that gives us more time. Ms. Turner King, did you have additional commentary that you wanted to share for edit on this proposal?
Well, I just included, now being shared on the screen, the yellow is the highlighted sentence, and I'm
Okay.
going to strike through that first sentence. My question is, as far as term, do you want to include that the committee would update the election board, I don't know, every 3 months? Like, how do you...
Yeah, that's addressed later in the document in
Okay.
terms of the 90 days after the first meeting. Maybe we can adjust all that down there in terms of the
Okay.
pace of reporting. Yeah.
I do think that these meetings of the Vote Center Study Committee would be subject to open door. And typically when we form other committees, and I'm thinking about most recently, like the council formed the JFAC committee, they set out the expectation that there would be like a bi-weekly meeting, or most boards and commissions have like a monthly scheduled meeting. Is the elections board intent for this committee to meet regularly? And if so, what would that meeting schedule look like?
Okay. Just for clarification, boards and ad hoc bodies that have been created in this way meet with what frequency in the county? Is it?
It depends. So, for example, the Justice Finance Advisory Committee, they're meeting bi-weekly. When we had the Criminal Justice, or the CJRC, Community Justice Reform Committee, they were bi-weekly. Committees who, some committees meet monthly, such as the Women's Commission, Environmental Commission. I think how frequent a committee meets is also somewhat determined by the task they have to complete. So for JFAC, they're writing a report that's due in September, so they're kind of meeting more frequently now. And so I guess how frequently this body would meet would be somewhat dependent on how quickly you would want them to come to the Vote Center plan.
Any commentary or discussion?
I would think bi-weekly would be helpful. Again, if we're going to extend the time out, we also want to make sure that things are getting done during that time. So to start with, I have no problem with it being bi-weekly.
Okay. Ms. Napoli?
That makes good sense. I think if the group is able to make that commitment. Also, in terms of their checking in with the election board here, it seems like maybe at first, 90 days seems like a long time to me personally. I'm more of a fan of transparency and keeping things moving along in an open communication kind of way. So I wondered if they could check in maybe every other month early on, just to make sure they're in track in the right direction. And then as it gets closer to the date, they would probably want to attend these meetings regularly every month, is what I would guess.
Okay.
Just a suggestion to consider.
That's good. I'm going to make a note for where we talk about reporting at the tail end here. I think that's good. I see that there's some language on screen that Ms. Turner King has drafted for this particular piece.
And I will fill in, I have bi-weekly, but I will put whatever time frame you would like there.
I agree that biweekly makes sense for what we're trying to accomplish, so I'm content with the language here. I'll go ahead and read out an amendment, and then we'll just bring it in. So I'll motion to amend that we add the Vote Center Study Committee will commit to hosting biweekly meetings to develop a Vote Center plan to be presented to and approved by the election board. That's my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, hearing a second. Ms. Wilson, will you call the roll on that amendment?
Chair Henry,
Yes?
Board Member Bickard?
Yes.
Board Proxy Mel?
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to the next section for membership qualifications. Ms. Turner King, did you have any observation about the membership qualifications section?
Yes, so I think the election, before I get into the specific members listed, when considering how big a committee should be, some of the considerations that you're going to want to take into account is for each of these meetings, you're going to have a quorum of that committee. So the bigger the committee is, the larger the quorum that's going to be needed. And so with a biweekly meeting schedule, you would need to consider, are there going to be enough people to have a meeting available that amount of times? I know that we had a redistricting committee, and that structure, I think, had 2 appointments by each party. This committee obviously is proposed to have more individuals, but just keep your quorum requirements into mind. And looking at the individual members, so you have 2 members appointed by the Democratic Party chair, 2 members appointed by the Republican chair, and then you have 2 members appointed by the Monroe County clerk, or 2 independent registered voters appointed by the Monroe County clerk. Is it at the intent of the board to have the clerk select those members, or does the board want to select those members?
I'll just start by saying I'm almost indifferent. I guess in the redistricting model, who selected the independent members for the redistricting board?
I don't know that there was independent members on the redistricting
We have had them,
committee.
haven't we? Ms. Wilson, I might be wrong. No, maybe not. Okay. Yeah,
I can check,
that's an
but-
institutional question. Yeah, it might precede my time. Well, so while we're looking for that, if any, we'll just go around the bench here. Ms. Benkart, did you have observations about additions or omissions or subtractions to this?
With all of,
Yeah.
well, I seem to recall there being a concern that we need to have the commissioners have to approve this, and so does the council. Do we want to have a commissioner and a member of the council on this committee as well, so that we at least are doing, including them in any kind of procedure, so that if they're going to disagree with something, we would know about it and handle it quickly instead of finding out at the end that they don't like the plan.
Okay.
What do you think?
Other thoughts?
So I didn't know if we wanted to discuss that further. I had a different thought. Is that okay to?
Sure.
jump in? So I guess 2 things. First, the independent registered voters by the Monroe County clerk, I would definitely defer to Nicole for feedback on that. And then the other piece is in terms of the Part 4.3, a registered voter who is currently enrolled at Indiana University. To me, that I assume that's a student, and I was just curious about that to clarify. And would it be a registered voter from any state, or should it be a registered voter from Indiana or local? Those are my only comments.
Yeah, words matter. No, those are good. Go ahead.
Sorry. So once you get past the independent voter, I did have a few additional thoughts, concerns. So you have a representative, so I'm assuming that you mean one person from each of the 3 enumerated lists. So the League of Women Voters, a member of community representing those with function or access needs, and a registered voter who is currently enrolled at Indiana University. I'm not sure what the intent of the election board is on how to select those individuals. And one thing that we have recently looked at with other boards and commissions is when you're selecting like just a registered voter or student, you are getting somewhat of a limited perspective. And the idea throughout all of the vote center plans that I've had is to have a broad perspective. So is it easier to say, a person from a person appointed from the Young Democrats or the College Republicans, or I don't know how you're picking that person. So if you're going to just say a registered voter who is a student, you're going to have to come up with some process. And then what happens if, 25 students applies? What's the criteria for picking between those people?
The one thing I could add to that, a criteria perhaps worth considering, is that at Indiana University, we have a number of students involved in the Big Ten voting challenge, and they do hold, because they're part of that steering committee, some of them, they hold a broader perspective in that way. So that, just again, to throw in as a criteria perhaps to consider.
Then to address Board Member Bankhart's question or concern about commissioners or council members being on the committee, I think that originally I looked at some plans that did have a commissioner or council member on the committee. However, since these meetings are going to be subject to open door, commissioners and council members could attend as they see fit and provide input on the vote plan. They don't necessarily need to be on the committee to be able to have a voice.
Okay.
That certainly works for me. I don't want to put any more people on here than we have.
I see that viewpoint too. So what we have here in the writing is sort of a hybrid proposal of something that feels like the way redistricting was done, which is very balanced, but also taking considerations for constituency groups that, as the author of this document, I identified in the previous work that was done in 2011 from specifically communities such as League of Women Voters, such as those experiencing disabilities in the community that had stake in the discussion about the vote centers. And so, I would only add to my own observation here that even the composition of those representatives from different segments could carry partisanship. Similar if we did appoint the commissioners of the council, or the composition of those bodies reflects a certain party right now, and you'd end up with a lot of, say, in my case, a lot of Democrats serving instead of keeping a balance. So I guess I'm erring toward the side of a balanced approach as much as possible between the two parties, and then the independent voter, which exists in our state, who do not vote in primaries but would have a stake in a general election vote, and identifying those individuals as we have for things like the recount, for example, where we had an independent voter that was observing that behavior, right? This is a little messy, and we may have to kind of pick through it bit by bit, but Ms. Turner-King, were you working on language as we were talking through this that would alter this on screen, or I may have missed it?
Well, I can
why don't
share
we
my
put it up on,
screen.
why don't we put it up on screen so we can at least see it together? And try to take these one by one. So are there any objections to the parties appointing a two members each, 1 and 2? Like, that would be okay. Are there any objections or amendments for subsection 1 or 2?
No.
No.
Okay, so those look pretty good. All right. For number 3, the independent, it wouldn't be really an independent registered voter because they don't register. They register to vote. They have not pulled a ballot in a partisan primary. Those are the people we'd be looking for, right? Ms. Wilson, do you have like a better way to say it in that case?
I do not. We have to say we do not register voters by party.
Right.
The party is determined, the party affiliation is determined by the voting record. So you're going to be voting for people who are actively voting in the general elections, but not in the primary elections. And you're looking for the independent voter.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's a pithy way to say. Yeah, if there's a pithy way to say two general election two voters who have not two voters who have not voted in a primary or a partisan primary.
A primary party affiliation by their voting record.
So my only concern with that is that if they abstain from voting in the primary, that means they're perhaps less engaged in the electoral process. And I would imagine we would want people who are sort of more engaged in the process. It's just a thought to consider. I wonder if it could be a person who does not have strong partisan affiliations, something with that language.
Yeah, it may be hard to appoint. I mean, my understanding is, Ms. Turner-King, I don't know if you found it, but for the county's redistricting, we did not have independent seats for the county's redistricting body, right?
I couldn't find it because I'm sharing my screen, so I
know
can't
the city
really
had
get to it.
a more complex redistricting organization for the city, but I'm pretty sure we didn't have it as we're looking. So we did not have independence for a county redistricting body.
From what I've been told, because this was before my time, I do not think there was an independent voter or person without party affiliations on the redistricting committee.
Okay. I'm going to flag that just to make sure we talk through the others, and maybe we can come back to it. So setting aside 3 for a moment, the representatives from the following communities of interest to improve the voting process. Are there concerns by the board that those individuals have a party affiliation, or that if they're serving on behalf of the, not like, for example, the league is a good example, let's say by a nonpartisan activity. If the person sitting in the chair from the league is representing the league's nonpartisan interest, is there any concern about that person's party, that individual's party affiliation at this point? We would just accept that they're sitting here on behalf of the league, for example. Are there concerns about that if they are a registered Democrat a person that's pulled Democratic or Republican primary ballots in that case? If I'm not making sense, that's okay too. I'm riffing off the top here.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I do have something to add, if
Sure.
I could just really briefly, because the PACE program at IU is rigorously nonpartisan,
Yeah.
and we're always looking to find ways to keep things balanced, as we're trying to do with this group as well. One of the things I'm wondering about, and I'm a novice here in this type of setting, so please forgive me if I'm off base, but is there, as this committee's being formed, is there a way to ask people to sign kind of a good faith statement for the more neutral people, to ask them, we're bringing you on board as more of a nonpartisan role. We have the Democratic representation, the Republican representation, and we're looking for nonpartisan representation as well. And having them sign like a good faith memo or something to agree to doing that as a part of their involvement. And I guess similarly, as Nicole reached out to me to be her proxy today, because my work is rigorously nonpartisan, I know there's a lot of other groups and people who represent nonpartisan perspectives as well. And that could be a strategy for going down that path for choosing people as well. So, if that makes sense.
I would have to look into whether you could have them sign some type of agreement up front that they would be representative of the nonpartisan view. I don't think we've ever done that with a board or commission before.
Yeah, I was just making it up.
I mean, there's oath taking for certain boards. After all, we took an oath to sit here.
For most of the boards that we have, and I'm thinking
This
of
is an ad hoc body. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we appoint members to the board, but I don't, like the Women's Commission, JFAC, CJRC, I don't think there were any oaths administered to those board members.
Okay.
So if we're looking at item number
Yeah.
4, can I clarify this by saying
Sure.
one representative?
Yeah, that's
So-
fair. Yeah, because I think we want to put a number on that. Yeah.
Okay, so one representative from each of the following: the League of Women Voters, a member of the community representing those with functional access needs. And I guess my question for the board is, how do you pick that person and who do you envision that person to be? Is it a person who has personal experience with having a functional or access need? Is it an individual who deals with functional or access needs in a professional a professional environment, such as like an ADA compliance officer or someone like that? I don't know that. I think you need to be a little bit more descriptive of who you want that person to be.
Okay, so focusing on number 2, are there comments from the board on how to be a little more granular about that particular representative?
Well, I do believe that it should be someone with a varied experience, not just a personal experience, but someone that actually recognizes things that may come up at these voting centers that will affect those with disabilities. And so I would go with someone with a broader one. Ms. Turner King said the ADA coordinator. If we have one somewhere in the community, that might be the way to go, or is there someone at IU that we know, or someone you know?
I was thinking of, and not necessarily to nominate him, but maybe he could help connect us with someone, is Michael Shermis from the city who does ADA compliance work. So it's just a thought.
And my recommendation is going to be, once you identify this person, I would suggest you talk to them first to make sure that they would be able to serve on the committee, that they're willing to make that time commitment, because I would hate to put someone on a committee and then later find out they're just not going to participate.
We could, we could add language that says either, to your point, Ms. Turner King, that it's a person that either, it's something that captures, represents, it represents either through a lived experience or professional organization or activity, those with the functional or access needs. Does that make sense? Because I don't want to exclude lived experience from the conversation. And in the case of the late Randy Paul, he was the largest advocate for this in our community a decade and a half ago. He not only lived it and worked in it. So so Randy is really the person we have in mind today in his spirit. When I think about a person who's going to be in a room advocating for accessibility at polling locations, it's finding. And sadly to say, the next Randy Paul. I mean, if he were here with us, he'd be the person to be saying these things right now, right?
And just because an individual with lived experience isn't a seated member, you're not excluding their voice. These are going to be public meetings. There has to be a public noticed meeting. If there's concerns on the vote plan as it develops in regards to ADA compliance, functional access needs, we're going to hear the voices of the community.
Yeah, okay. I feel pretty strongly that one of the members should be a human at the table that can weigh in granularly on the decision making about the vote centers from that, because ADA and HAVA is so central to the idea of accessibility to a polling location like that. To me, feels it makes sense to me to have that seated. That's my view on that. I don't know if the language that we've recrafted here is satisfactory to the other board members, but I feel like we would be able to capture that if but my vote is to have that space there. But are there any other comments about the verbiage of this before we make some consideration?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I would just, in terms of what Molly has highlighted here, I would add through lived experience and/or professional expertise.
That would be fair. Ms. Benkart, do you have any commentary on this particular one?
No, I don't think I have anything else to add.
The third one being the registered voter. I'm sorry.
Before we move on, how is that person selected? Is it going to be by application of the election board?
We should head back up to subsection 4 there after your or before your colon, right? So and maybe clarify the how. So I am content with having the clerk select these persons in the same manner that we've asked for the independently registered voter, which we haven't cleaned that language up yet. But I don't think we need to go through a round of the election board approving applications. I think that deflecting to the clerk to fill these roles is fine. In a similar way that we've asked the party chairs to select down on their membership, things that are not party, not a partisan, I would be fine with the clerk selecting on her role as the executive over elections in our county.
So after the word,
So one representative from each of the following
Yeah.
communities working to improve the voting process by appointment of the Monroe County Clerk. Yeah, I'd be okay with that. Are there comments about the appointment person from the board?
No, I don't have any. I'm not really sure who else you'd pick to do it, so.
Yeah. As long as Nicole's in agreement, I think it makes a lot of sense.
This is why I don't miss meetings. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That's gonna make the paper anyway. Let's looking at the registered voter who is currently enrolled at Indiana University. Ms. Napoli, you pointed out, how is this a student or is this a human, or how does this work? I guess my question too, after you had said it, is that given that we now have a larger amount of time that we're working with, there's risk that a student appointee will not be here or graduate during the time of that work. I guess I'd open up to some thought here about how to maybe accommodate if there is an appointee from that very large constituency representing those voices, how we account for that sort of duration question. I mean, I know the city went through this with redistricting recently, where they had a tight schedule. They had students representing constituencies off campus on the city, but there's some thoughts about how to frame this one out a little better. Ms. Benkart, do you have any observation?
Oh, how did they do it? I mean, how did they come up with those people?
The city redistricting, to my knowledge, it was it was partisan student appointments, right? There was a young Republican and a young Democratic member of the redistricting for the city that weighed in on that. Now, the challenge, as it was reported, was those were pretty hard to fill. It took a while for the city to identify those people to fill and serve. In that way. So when we get that granular, there's some challenge. But then on the converse, the proposal I had put forward here is that particular constituency, given its size and space, might merit having somebody who sits here and helps us sort through what voting centers look like from their perspective. That's my view anyway. Are there other thoughts on that?
I don't think anything in addition to what I already said earlier, but it's good to be thoughtful about this. And perhaps, I guess one little piece is perhaps if you wanted to make sure that they didn't graduate before spring of 25, that would be worth stating in the requirement. However, a lot of them do travel overseas from time to time, so there's never a guarantee.
They could also leave school if they,
Yes.
also, if you're meeting bi-weekly, they're going to have to fit in those meetings into an already demanding academic schedule.
So if we added language that maybe qualified that a little bit, is the idea of having that voice as an official person acceptable to, or does anyone object to having that role identified? I guess maybe we should start there. Ms. Benkart, do you have any objection to having a student representation?
No, I don't really have an objection to that, but the concerns we've raised makes me a little concerned about having someone that's going to be able to see the process through. Does the person need to be a voting member, or can they be a non-voting, or does that take away too much of the voice of that person?
As an alternative, each party does get 2 members, and if the party wanted to include a student voice, they could consider that in the members to which they're appointing.
I guess we could require that if you want, or you could require one of those to be a student that's appointed by the...
I'm not sure I understood Molly's last point. I'm sorry.
So each of the Democratic and the Republican Party both get 2 members appointed. And so
I see.
if the Democratic Party, for example, wanted to appoint someone from the Young Democrats, that incorporates the student voice. It would just serve as a dual appointment.
So we'd have 2 students instead of, got it.
Correct.
You know what, I'm happy to take that. I'm sure Taylor wouldn't mind either. I don't want to speak for her, but I would be happy with omitting or deleting number 3, and then just I would trade off to say I would like 3 members appointed from each party, one of which is a student. that is currently enrolled at the university. Would that be, okay.
How many people are we?
So we've added one more basically by omitting,
Correct.
yeah. And then, yeah, so that, but then that means that the independently registered voters are outnumbered two by two there. Quorum at this point would be 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 9, 10. Quorum is 6. Out of
So
10.
if you're moving each party appointing 3, so 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so you're up to 5.
Okay.
So I changed the language on number 1 to say 3 members by appointment of the Monroe County Democratic Party chairman with the requirement that 1 member appointed is enrolled. Do you want it to specifically say a Indiana University student, or do you want a college student?
Okay. And then the same language for 2, right?
Well, to the clarifying question,
I'm sorry?
do you want it to say specifically an Indiana University student, or is it okay that it just says a college student?
I would prefer to say, yeah, enrolled Indiana College, or Indiana University student. And we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
There could be value to.
I mean,
What
you're
about
going to
an
have
Ivy
vote
Tech
centers
program?
all over the county
Sure.
potentially, and there are other collegiate institutions within the county.
Okay. Now I follow what you're saying. Since that phrase would be inclusive, enrolled university or college student, if there was a appointee from Ivy Tech through one of the parties, that would be fine. Yeah. So we can say enrolled university student, or university or college student.
Ideally, it would be great to have both institutions represented.
In university or college student in Monroe County, then is that what we have to do to make that fit?
I think so. You may end up with 2 from one institution or the other, but you could see how it goes, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more conversations about these representatives.
Yeah. Okay. That works. And
The language in number in I is okay.
Yeah, well, it's okay, and we'll vote on it, but yeah, it's okay to get it down. I would copy that over to sub 2, yeah. Okay, that was a lot of work on that, and I have a feeling this is going to take a little more time today than what I think I know one of our proxy has today. But I guess on this piece, if we could maybe vote on the qualifications and get that enrolled, and then take a look at the rest here, I'd feel like we made some headway here. I want to just take a look at the language. Everybody just take a look at what's on screen one more time.
And I'm going to delete the language in 2 and move up the highlighted language.
Right, I see what you're doing, right. So that would become the second human, yeah, okay. So just everybody take a breath and look at that, and then 36, okay.
We haven't discussed the non-voting members yet.
Yeah, that's just, I think, in my view, an enumeration of people that need to be available to serve the board, be in the room to discuss at the table some things. Now, I guess the question is, do we need to do it this way, or is this staffing? And they're listed as non-voting members because these are really technical expertise, such as you provide right now in your current role. Do we need to actually outline that in this way? What's your thought?
So as of right now, it just says a representative from election equipment vendors. I don't know if the vendor will end up invoicing us for their participation. Is the goal to have someone from the technological department there? Or do you want a vendor? And then I think the question is, can the vendor participate? Will they bill us for that? Are you willing to pay that invoice? Is there going to be a need is a contract needed for their participation? I think a lot goes into having a vendor on it.
Yeah, I would say if the whole point of that is, so again, the spirit of this being, we list out the personnel we want to be at these meetings bi-monthly to answer questions. If that if that's too granular, if there's a question that needs to be sent to the vendor, it may not they may not need to be in the room. The message could be sent to them in between meetings and figure that out, right? I hear what you're saying with that. I'm okay with omitting that. Judge Benkert, do you have any view on that?
What about having somebody from the, tech division from the county? Or would that be helpful or not?
Well, only
I know
that
how much they get
the
involved.
TSC doesn't really manipulate
Okay.
the machinery, right? And Ms. Wilson, that's right, right? The vendors are the ones that support our election equipment. It's not our TSD that support the election equipment, right? So I mean, our internal technical services for the county do not manipulate election machinery.
For the most part, they do not set election.
Right. Yeah, okay.
They provide other support.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, this section may be superfluous because staff provide time to bodies all the time. I'm okay with striking all of it if the idea is staff are here to support that body.
And I think if the intent is just to have a vendor available for questions, the vote center plans do have to, get through equipment use, technology, all of that. When I envision that the steering committee or vote center committee is going to have an agenda of items to go through. And when it gets to the equipment line, you can see if the vendor is willing to make a presentation, be available for questions. They don't have to be named as a non-voting member to be available.
Okay.
I have nothing further to add. Makes sense.
So I mean, I would be comfortable just omitting all of B. I think in that case. All right, so let's get a look at the composition one more time on screen.
So that brings us to 10 members, so your quorum's going to be 5.
That seems reasonable to me.
Do we have the right balance that we want? I know we were talking about a bit now, 6, 3, 3, and how would that work? 3, 3, and then
We have the
2.
2, but then you don't really have, hopefully wouldn't have anybody necessarily that's partisan. On the other 2, maybe?
I will say most of our boards have an odd number because when you start voting on things,
Yeah, there's that.
so I mean, if you do, you could reduce it to 1 independent registered voter. That way each party has their appointment. That's just a suggestion, and in no way do you have to listen to me on that.
Right. But that would be 6 to 1, in terms of that. I would actually increase the independent voter to
That's
3.
exactly what I was going to say.
I'd be okay with that. So let's change that to 3, and then let's see.
makes
how
it
this looks.
11?
Yeah, that would be 11 in there, and then,
Yeah.
So your quorum is 6.
That's fair. Okay. Well, I guess we'll entertain a motion on adoption of the member qualifications as written.
So motioned.
Is there a second?
Second?
All right. Ms. Wilson, if you'll take the roll on this one.
Chair Leonard,
Yes.
Board Member Rayford,
Yes.
Board Proxy Nat.
Yes.
Okay. I know we're at the 2:00 hour, and I know, again, one of the members have constraint here. I guess in the time we've got, a quorum for us is 2, right? Yeah, so I guess I would maybe say if you do need to depart, are there any other things you wanted to raise off of this in the event that you have to leave before we have to call the meeting?
Not at this point, but I may have comments down the road.
Ms. Benkert, do you want to keep working through this today, or?
I am free to do that.
Great, okay, and we have the room. So, all right, looking to requirements. Molly, or Ms. Turner King, did you have anything on requirements that we needed to take a look at in particular?
So Indiana Code 31118.14 outlines all the requirements of that must be included in this plan. And it enumerates 17 items. And so we need to make sure that those 17 items and all of their subsections are included within the requirements of the plan.
Is it just possible to add a line that says the vote center plan will meet all the criteria as listed in IC, whatever the IC is, rather than listing them out. I think that would probably be efficient. Yeah. And then and whatever we're calling out here is just germane to our local questions, right? So like, here's everything under IC, the 17 things, and then here's some stuff locally we want to focus on. And those are those things. Is that fair? Okay, so I know you're working on putting that on screen, but I'll give it a minute. Okay, let me know when you're ready to share there, Molly. We'll get a look at it.
And while she's working on that, I just want to say I'm going to have to excuse myself in a few minutes, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Oh, thank you, and it was great to have your insight. For those that do not know, Lisa Marie is the director of the PACE program on campus at IU, and she is very much engaged in the business of civic engagement and getting students engaged, and your insights have been great here today. Thank you for filling in.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so as on screen, so we've got a new, the Vote Centers Committee shall study, produce a Vote Center plan in accordance with IC, 31118, 1 through 4, and then our local enumeration of some things we would like the board to consider: the review of past work, the any division guidance from the Indiana Election Division, past poll data. Were there any comments about any of these local requirements that we need to call out?
I believe there was a comment about having no fewer than 5 comparable.
So subsection 5, the selection and analysis of no fewer than 5 comparable counties to Monroe County that have the following. And I think the comment was, do they need to have all 4 of these to be a sample county? I would say, no, because it might be hard to find a county that has like all of those. But I think that if we're trying to compare different apples to apples, that we get it as close as possible. So I would be okay with something that reads like the selection and analysis of no fewer than 5 comparable counties that have one of the following criteria, at least to get it on. If we're looking at 5 different counties, at least that county has at least one of these things that we're interested in, which would be paper ballots or the university population, or rural, urban, or populations comparable to Monroe. Do the board members have any feeling this should be one of them, 2 of them for this committee to look at? What I want to avoid is picking a county that has absolutely no relationship to our county at all. Small rural e-poll book. 10,000 locations vote. I mean, whatever, but like something like that. It just doesn't match. Any thoughts on this?
Ms. Turner King had indicated she had gotten some of those plans.
It's a survey already. Yeah.
Right. So if we provide that from the counties that we think they should look at, then we don't have to worry about.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I haven't had a chance to look at what Ms. Turner King's pulled. And I'm also a little leery to pre-select, I guess. I mean, the committee doing its own, they may find something with all, the time they've been given that might be better. I'm not sure I could speak to that today. Yeah.
What if we created a language that have at least one and at most all of the following criteria? Something to encourage them to consider as many criteria as possible.
Yeah.
I think, because one of the things I think is I like for sure having 1, 3, and 4. I think all of those are very important. It's the large university population that might be the problem.
Yeah, there are only a handful. What's large, right? And there are only a handful of counties in Indiana that have,
True.
By proportion, a student population. So one is, at least one works. I'm good with that. Okay, are there other concerns about the requirement section as we're editing here?
No, I don't think so.
And okay. Ms. Turner King, were there any other concerns with the requirements section?
I think some of the requirement sections is duplicative of what's in the statute, but I don't think that's a problem. It's, it's just redundant.
That's okay, I think, for this, at this point. I think looking toward the very tail end with the reporting requirement, and as Ms. Napoli's leaving, I'll make sure I talk about this because you brought it up. But thank you. But the changing the reporting requirement now that we do not have 150 days time limit to every 60 days, that would tighten up the reporting back to the board and let us keep progress. So I guess maybe on that one, 60 days after the first meeting of the committee, and then since B is now redundant because of the change in the duration, and maybe deleting B altogether, and then just saying for subsection 2, and then every 60 days thereafter, or something to that effect. So basically, every 60 days, we're getting a report until this thing's done. Does that make sense?
My other suggestion earlier was as it gets closer to the nearing of completion, and perhaps once a month is what I would suggest.
Yeah, I see that too. That might be harder to meet. I mean, if you think about if they're working on a reporting requirement while finishing it, but I hear what you're saying. Like there's something about.
You could just say 60 days after the first meeting of the committee and as requested by the election board at their monthly meeting, and then you could let them know in advance, hey, I would like an update.
Is that fair? Okay, let's try that language.
Yeah, sounds good.
Let's see what that looks like. And then thank you.
Thank you, Ken, very much, and good luck.
Yeah, we're gonna pass all sorts of stuff while you leave. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, thank you so much. All right. Levity helps. Anyway, all right.
Do you want anything in there that says the goal would be to be completed by January of 2026, or?
No, at this point, I think, I don't want to put an end date on it at all. I think that, because I think what will happen, right, is like, let's say reporting happens and we get a series of no reports, right? That would create some urgency for us to change or amend this. If we get, amazing work done, then that's great. But if we've all agreed that a finite time is not great today, I don't want to. Okay, so I'm good with that. I guess at this point.
And I added number 6 as you're looking at this. It was kind of embedded within the reporting requirement, so I just broke it out.
Right. Okay. Ms. Beckhardt, do you have any other things you'd like to add to this?
I do not.
Okay. Oh, all right. It sounds like working out loud. I love it. I will make a motion to accept the entirety of the proposed study committee outline as amended.
So moved.
All right. I will second. Ms. Wilson, if you'll take the roll.
Sarah Henry,
Yes.
Board Member Baker.
Yes.
Yes, passes. All right, we got some appointments to do. Great. Progress. All right, moving on in the agenda. Oh, wow, where are we now? Public comment. The floor is open for public comment. Checking on chat, seeing none today. All right, seeing no one at the podium for public comment, Ms. Turner King.
Sorry, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So we just passed the vote center. It was entitled the Proposed Vote Center Study Committee document, but now it's not proposed, it's passed. Do you want me to add whereas language to the top of that to make it more like a formal resolution? So
my review of other compositions was that those clauses weren't necessary, but do you feel that they are? Because because at that point, because I've reviewed city compositions, it was done by ordinance. I've reviewed some others, but if the whereas and therefore are required, I mean, it sounds like we need another vote then on that. Is
I
that
think you could vote. I think it is to the discretion of the election board if you want to add those. I don't think they're required. I think it does make it look more formalistic.
I understand that.
And, you know, the motion could be approval of this document with the addition of whereas clauses, which will literally say, whereas the Monroe County Election Board on such and such date established the Vote Center Study Committee as follows, and then it will be the rest of the document.
All right, well, I guess since we voted on accepting it, also, I would just say, based on previous documents I've seen the board vote on that have not been structured that way, I'm indifferent, but it'd be really good practice moving forward that draft documents have that language. Because now it's, you know, structurally, I got to go back and reconsider, right? Like that's rough. I'm basically content with what we've accomplished today, and maybe as a practice moving forward when we have restaffed and that we present documents that are in a more formal mode. Would that be acceptable? Do you think? Ms. Benkart, do you have an opinion one way or another?
Do you think it's important to have that, the date establishing?
Well, that'd be so
committee
marked in the
minutes?
minutes, right?
It could be in the minutes, but my question also is, do you want me to put a signature line with as established by and then have your formalized signature?
Let's say yes, and we can just accomplish that at the next meeting to sign off. But I don't think that would preclude the parties from starting to identify their personnel at this point because we've taken the action. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, I think that works.
That works.
All right. Well, in that little, in that audible, the review at the booth. All right, back to public comment. Seeing none. Just one more time. Okay. All right. With that, the next meeting of this board will be on Thursday, September 7th at 1 p.m. At that point, we'll be approaching early voting, and I know that we tend to go into a pattern of recess at that point as we get closer and closer. So just be mindful that we're getting very close to voting for the general election. But at this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, and with that, we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everybody. That's it.